We shared with you guys a whole bunch of living examples and case stories of co-sensing. And now we want to take a moment to wrap up all these stories with 5 core principles and practices that you saw embodied throughout all these examples of co-sensing.
The first one is core questions. Identify what are the core questions and form a core team around those questions. So in the case of the German healthcare example, the core question had to do with the patient-physician relationship.
It was the belief of the physician network that their relationship to the patients really constitutes the core axis of the whole healthcare system, and if changed, would allow them to change the entire system. So the quality of the co-sensing process really is a function of the quality of the core question that you identify.
The second practice is sensing journeys. Take deep dive learning journeys to the places of most potential. A sensing journey is not a benchmarking tour. It's a deep dive into an organization or a community that matters to the situation that you're dealing with. So in the case of the German healthcare example, that meant shadowing the emergency care physicians, spending time with patients to see what the system is like from those perspectives.
What we found is that going to the edges of the system, kind of experience the system through the eyes of the most marginalized players in that system, is a high leverage point. For example, in a recent healthcare transformation story in Namibia, we took the core team and had them walk in the shoes of remote patients in order to use the experience to understand the deeper dynamics that operate in the system. If you try to do the same thing inside organizations, 2 useful questions usually are to ask, what might be places that if you took a deep dive journey into would be most helpful given the situation you are facing, and that currently you only know very little of. So these 2 criteria, relevance very high and current knowledge or access to very low, that's a good starting point to identifying good places of most potential. Number 3, suspend your voice of judgment and connect with your sense of wonder. Remember the Detroit executive team that in the early 1980s went to Japan in order to see the lean production revolution, but then their mind was unable to recognize what their eyes actually saw, which is production without inventory. If your old habits of judgment and your old experiences prevent you from seeing with fresh eyes, no sensing journey can help you. The key for effective sensing is when you come across something, some data, some observation that's contradicting your own assumptions, that's contradicting what you expected to see, then you lean into it with curiosity rather than discarding it.
Number 4, practice deep listening and dialogue. Connect to others with your mind and heart wide open. So really at the core of the co-sensing practices and principles that we've been discussing this week is an awakening of the intelligence of the heart. And another way to think about that is the levels 3 and levels 4 listening. Level 3 being empathic listening and level 4 being generative listening.
And you have already seen a bunch of really great examples that embody kind of this deeper state of listening. Remember the conductor clip, opening the arms, accessing the empathy, and then dropping the baton and really connecting deeper to the other and the emerging moment of music that was happening there. Really open up the perception from a narrow focus perspective to something that includes the whole periphery. And in fact, the way we are sitting here, which is almost next to each other rather than opposed to each other, often makes for a much better conversation, kind of allows you to much more naturally kind of move into a dialogue where you're looking into the same direction and tune into each other's perspective. I remember the MIT ULab here last fall when people came back and shared all their experiences. Here's how one of them summed up all these conversations. She said, In order to connect with another person on that deeper level, I first have to create a place for that other person in my heart. That's really at the core of this practice here. And when we do that, if we create this place in our heart, it is a place of deep appreciation for the other, and it's a place of love for the other. And that, if we can intentionally create that place, that makes all the difference, and that allows a conversation to drop to that deeper level.
Number 5, create collective sensing mechanisms that make the system see itself. So in the German healthcare story, this is the part with the red dots and the green dots, where afterwards the mayor got up, and the teacher got up, and the farmer got up. And what happened in this part of the story was people went from seeing the system as something out there, outside of themselves, to seeing themselves as co-originators of the system.
Holding the space is a key capability that is a necessary condition for a group to go through a process like that. And in the case of co-sensing, some of the core points that maybe when you hold the space for a group you're facilitating or you're guiding through such a process, you maybe want to consider. Number 1, intention. The power of intention. So you really want to be very clear in the intention of such an event of collective sensing. Secondly, intellectual frameworks. You saw the iceberg model, in this case applied to the patient-physician relationship, and you saw it was depicted in a way that allowed the community to see itself in that mirror and to assess kind of their current way of operating. 3, the emotional and sensory rewiring. So that's kind of the whole bit about the learning journeys, walking in each other's shoes, and really tapping into the experience of the system from the viewpoint of another stakeholder. 4, the power of place, creating a hospitable space that in a very natural way allows the participants to get into a dialogic relationship with themselves, with each other. 5, ownership. Shared ownership really is another core condition making this a success. And lastly, key quotes. We identify key quotes, which then we are reading back to the community. So those are 6 aspects that we have seen many times and that are really key to holding the space for co-sensing workshops in an effective way. So here there are 5 core principles and practices of co-sensing that we went over in this clip.
The first one, identify the core questions and form a core team around them.
Number 2, sensing journeys. Take deep dive learning journeys into the places of most potential.
Number 3, suspend the voice of judgment and connect with your sense of wonder.
Number 4, practice deep listening with your mind and heart wide open.
And finally, number 5, create collective sensing mechanisms where the people in the system can begin to see themselves.
So basically, you start here with clarifying essential questions, and then you link out into the world with sensing journeys, with collective sensing mechanisms. And while you are doing it, you cultivate your interior conditions of listening by suspending the voice of judgment and by accessing the deep listening with your mind and heart wide open.